The religious love to think that they're destroying atheism, but atheists are just pointing and laughing in their faces. They are doing absolutely nothing of the sort. They're just proving what a bunch of gullible buffoons they are. Not that that's any surprise. So let's go watch another example coming up next. This video comes from Biblical Studies and Reviews, hosted by Stephen Hackett. It starts out weak, I admit, but when it really starts going, it's just a litany of bad ideas, irrational beliefs, and really terrible reasons to believe. Big surprise there, I know. But this is why the religious have such problems coming to grips with reality. They don't wanna. They are terrified of it. They don't understand what it is that they're doing wrong or why they're doing it, and that's kind of a problem, isn't it? So let's start a multi-part look at why this in no way proves that Christianity is true, and certainly it does absolutely nothing whatsoever to destroy atheism. It just makes them look terrible. And what else is new?
I want to do something today that very few Christian thinkers, philosophers, apologists have done.
Oh, I bet just tons have done it, because there is nothing new under the sun in Christian apologetics. And that goes for all religions, but Christianity is kind of boring. And that doesn't mean we can't look at it as a different take, and remember, I've got no clue what he's about to suggest, but for a video called Christianity is True, and a thumbnail that says Atheism Destroyed, I figure there can't be too many alternatives. Still, perfectly willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and see what he's got, but come on, are we really expecting that much? I'd love to be surprised though, so please, good sir, tell us what you're up to.
That is, I want to make an offer to you. I want to offer you an opportunity to have a Zoom call with me. At the end of this video, I'll give you an opportunity, or at least I'll give you my contact information, and you can reach out to me. And if you're a seeker or someone who's interested in Christianity and is finding that you're having some sort of barrier to coming to Christ, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm not here to fight with you. If you're out to just try to, prove your point.
So, you just want to talk to gullible fools who really want to believe. Yeah, okay, hard pass. And no, this isn't original either, because I have seen plenty of theists saying, I want to talk to you. I've even seen quite a few of them who actively want to talk to atheists, at least until the atheists actually show up, and then they just head for the hills. I'll give him credit for at least making the effort. That at least takes some guts, but that's not really what we're here for, is it? He says Christianity is true, and atheism somehow gets destroyed. Let's see your evidence for either of those claims. I'm willing to bet neither are going to be that impressive, but hey, let's see. Oh, and he says in his comments that he allows most comments that don't include swearing. So maybe that's another good sign. I don't know. We catch a ton of them just deleting everybody who disagrees or makes them look bad, so I don't know. If anybody wants to go through the comments and tell me if there's anything there worthwhile, okay, go ahead and do that. So far, so good. Get to your points.
This call's probably not for you, but if you're a genuine seeker or someone who's interested in Christianity, reach out to me. I want to make time to talk to you about this great gospel and give you an opportunity to hear what Christ is offering you.
All right, I'm going to just fast forward to something worthwhile because this isn't it. Again, though, he doesn't want to talk to anyone that he has to defend himself with, and I find that interesting. He's just looking for the easy targets and not the ones that could ask any of the difficult questions that he has no answers for or would ask for any kind of demonstrable evidence. So I guess I won't be calling. Not that I had any interest to begin with. He's after ignorance and gullibility, and that certainly isn't me. So anyhow, we'll see how much fast forwarding I have to put in before he tries to prove anything. and I'm hoping it won't be that long.
And so most of the people who watch this video are all-time viewers. If you're watching this video, you know by now, not all these guys is always asking you to do certain things or hit like buttons. There's nothing wrong with it. If friends do that, that's fine. But you know that's not really my style. But I'm asking you on this video, if you do know someone who would like to hear more about the gospel, I want to help. Let's partner together. Share this video. Share this video with your friends or someone who's seeking so that we can partner together to help reach people for Christ.
No thanks. Of course, if he could just demonstrate that Christianity was true with objective evidence to back it up, that would go a long way toward bringing people to Christ, wouldn't it? Instead, he makes these bombastic, unsupported and unsupportable claims, and then he pretends that he wants to save people's souls without showing that souls are even a thing in the first place, and that shouldn't impress anyone. Now, I did kind of peek forward a little bit, sue me, just to make sure he wasn't going to spend the entire video asking for people to call him, and he doesn't, so that's a good thing. Normally I don't do that, but the first minute and a half of this video was just him begging for attention, and that's not impressive, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't wasting my time, and certainly I didn't want to waste yours. But he does get somewhere eventually, and honestly, I didn't even pay attention to what he was saying. I mean, not really. So we're really going to just experience the apologetics together when it comes. I just like being upfront with people. So let's get back to his presentation, already in progress.
Now, I'm going to launch right in now and offer you my reasons for why I'm a Christian. Today I have nothing to sell you. There's no affiliate links. I've turned off ads on this video. This is all about trying to reach people for Christ and tell them why Christianity makes sense.
Except it doesn't. Yes, we'll get there, but I have no ads ever, at least not that I signed up for. I can't really control what YouTube does on its own. I have no idea what they're doing because I'm using an ad blocker, and I recommend everybody else does too. But if they're doing stuff without my consent, okay, I can't control that. And I'm also never going to try to sell anything. I have no merch. I'm not trying to sell t-shirts. I don't sell anything. Hell, I don't even push my Patreon because I'm not trying to make money at all. Hardly anybody ever uses my Patreon anyhow. I appreciate the people who do, but nobody has bought me a coffee in over a year, which is, well, whatever. It just shows how little I have my hand out, yet here I am, consistently putting out content for people to consume, and I ask nothing from anyone. If you want to, great, that's appreciated. If not, no harm, no foul. I'm not pretending that I'm not going to eat without your help. I'm fine, don't worry. Then again, I don't pretend that I have a magical man in the sky that cares about what I'm doing and wants to take care of me. Yet, the people who believe that, or claim to believe that, those are the people who always want money, right? What's God doing here? Not a whole lot, apparently, so let's get back to his reasons and see if they're worthwhile.
Now, for me, as C.S. Lewis said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it.
I'm going to stop you right there. How do you see it? Because that's a knowledge claim, and knowledge claims require evidence. How exactly do you see it? What evidence can you present that any of it ever happened at all? I'm willing to bet there's absolutely nothing there. Nothing but faith. This is why you have to ask these people a whole lot of questions, because they don't tend to have much, if anything, intelligent to say. It's why the religious model is generally top-down. Some guy preaching for an extended period of time, telling you what he thinks, not a back and forth conversation where there's a lot of give and take and a lot of information being freely exchanged. That's one reason I'm very, very active in my comments, and if this video is anything to go by, this guy isn't. There are very few comments that he's actually responded to, and the ones that he has, at least the ones that I looked at, it's all just, thanks for commenting. But he doesn't actually address any of his detractors, whereas I do. Every single one of them. The videos are kind of an open door to invite conversations, And the religious, they don't tend to do that very much, do they? But I'll shut up right now and let him continue, although you can expect me to break in quite a bit.
But because by it, I see everything else. That's a perfect summary for me of why I believe Christianity.
And that makes no sense at all. I'm not trying to read into things, although that's sometimes hard to do given how much experience I have with the religious. I wouldn't say if there were lots of different takes on the same material, but there really isn't. It's always fifis and faith, just as I'm sure this is going to turn into coming up. It's why he doesn't want to really talk to us. He said as much earlier, and his behavior in his comments proves it. He's only looking for the gullible suckers who will buy into this stuff emotionally without having any difficult questions and without expecting him to back anything up objectively. And I'm sorry, but that's not us. That shouldn't be anyone. He's looking for the rubes, which is defined as a naive or inexperienced person who is easy to manipulate. They want nothing at all to do with people who actually understand the situation, often a whole lot better than they do. It makes it really hard to lie to them, and I know that's unfair to this guy because we know next to nothing about him, but we catch the apologists in lies constantly, so it's really hard not to make that comparison. These are people who don't have solid answers to difficult questions. They just really want to believe, but really wanting to believe is just not enough.
I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents raised me to believe in the Lord.
And therefore, he was brainwashed before the age of reason, and it's really hard to get that mental poison out of your system once it's firmly entrenched. This is why childhood indoctrination is so insidious, and this is why the religious all practice it. People aren't even aware of how scarred they've been by well-meaning parents and clergy, although I'm sure some of the clergy are very well aware, which is why they push it. They know they've got to get the kids when they're young and stupid to have any chance to make money off them later on in life. It might sound hypercritical, but I think it's actually true.
And I trusted in him, and I found that the claims that he made in Scripture were true for me.
There is no true for you. There is only true. Truth exists for everyone. This is the postmodernist bullshit that idiots like Oprah fell for. The force of gravity is the same for everyone. You don't have your own reality. You don't just get to pick and choose what's true for you. If you think that, then you are an idiot. And that's the sad part, because there are an awful lot of idiots out there. People who desperately want some things to be true, even if they're not, and conversely, some things to be false, even though they're not, so they just play make-believe because they really want the world to be what they want the world to be. But that doesn't make it true, does it? A lot of these people are theists, as if that's any surprise, because they care more about their feelings than they do about the facts. Then they just get on YouTube and show the world what a bunch of clueless morons they are, which is also not a surprise. Now, they're not all religious. There are non-religious people who do the exact same thing. I'm not criticizing them alone, but that's kind of the focus of the channel, so that's where we're going. So let's just keep that in mind. So anyway, nothing is true for you. It's true or it's not true. Stop being an idiot.
But as I got older, I wanted to explore, do I just believe this because my parents taught it to me? Is it really true? So I began to listen to some of the most articulate atheistic thinkers of our time.
And that's your mistake right there, or one of them anyhow. Not that listening to other people is bad, but if that's all you're doing, then you're not learning anything. I don't want people to just listen to me and just blindly believe whatever it is I'm saying. Don't do that. I'm human. I make mistakes. Go out and do your own research. Learn what the actual facts are, and then compare those to the things that you believe. If your beliefs fall apart at the sight of actual reality, then your beliefs are wrong, no matter how they make you feel. The facts outweigh your emotions 100% of the time. Now, he was talking about listening to atheists, and I just cut him off. So let's be fair and get back to that.
And they began to pose these questions. I went back and forth, but it came down to me. Number one, it seemed true to me.
So you're an idiot. Because how it seems to you is irrelevant. It doesn't matter what seems true. It matters what is true. If I had given up the search and gone with what seemed true, because I'd been programmed that way nearly from birth, then I'd probably still be religious today. The religious don't want you thinking on your own. They don't want you to verify their claims. They don't want you to ask any questions. They just want you to believe, just like they do. Reality doesn't change because it seems to me. It is what it is, and if you think otherwise, then you are the one in the wrong. But I think he had another point, so let's go listen to that.
Everything in my experience seemed to ring true, but also it made sense of so much in the world. That is, for example, my moral experience.
He's still doing the same thing though, right? It feels good. Who cares? This is what happens when you start out with preconceptions that are not justifiable in reality. This is why so many of the theists we look at wind up looking so dumb. They are starting with bad ideas and only building on those. But it says so in the Bible. So what? You haven't justified the Bible. You haven't provided any independent evidence that what it says in the Bible is true. And by that, I mean your specific supernatural claims. Just because you really like it, that doesn't make it true. It's only true if it's true. And they can't get beyond that because they've been brainwashed. Don't ask questions and don't doubt, or God is gonna get ya. Yet you have no credible reason to believe that God is real to begin with. This is the mind poison that festers in the brains of the religious. It's how the religious keep them obedient. It makes them too scared to do anything else. It makes them do what this guy did. It keeps them inside the faith because they're too terrified to look outside. Anyhow, he was about to say something about morality, and since that's one of my personal favorite topics, let's go see what he has to say.
If everything were reduced down to just matter and motion, which is essentially what most atheists do. Now, I realize that atheism is a label for just someone who doesn't believe God, but I don't know any atheist, I've never met an atheist who would affirm other supernatural entities outside of God. Most of them are naturalist or materialist.
Because that's the only thing that we actually have any evidence for. It's not a statement of faith, it's a statement of fact. If you could produce demonstrable, testable evidence for the supernatural, or whatever it is you want to claim is out there, then we would believe it. Or at least I would. I couldn't speak for anybody else. The problem is you can't do that, and because you can't do that, I'm going where the evidence leads. And it doesn't lead to your side. There's a fundamental difference between the way that you're looking at things, which is through your emotions, and the way that I'm looking at them, which is through the demonstrable facts. I don't care about your wishes and dreams. I care only about what you can prove is true.
But what it came down to me is so much of our experience on an atheistic worldview just becomes an illusion.
That is not remotely true. Here's a rock. It's in my hand. Is this an illusion? I can bash you in the head with it. Does it feel like an illusion to you? The problem here, and I think this is where he's headed, and we'll see in a minute, but he has his illusions that he's really emotionally attached to, and then he just projects his delusions onto everybody else because he really wants everyone else to be just like he is. He is not remotely the first theist that I've ever heard say this, but when I ask them what, from my worldview, is an illusion, they just change the subject. They have nothing of any substance to say. That, or they just go on to describe their own illusions and get upset when I don't share them. So I guess our problem is that we're not the overly emotional gits that they are. I don't know.
For example, my moral experience. It seems to me that there are things that are really right and really wrong.
No, you've been indoctrinated into believing that. You don't understand how human societies actually work. You've just been lied to your entire life. If you are told the same lie over and over and over enough, you start to believe that it's true. But that doesn't mean that it's true. This is especially obvious in people who move to significantly different cultures. Initially, they have serious problems adapting because they've been programmed to think that one culture, a different culture, is correct, that their moral and social views are absolutely true, and that often gets them into trouble with the new culture. Now, assuming that the new culture doesn't just kill them outright or put them in prison or throw them out or whatever, because we all know that happens, over time they do adapt to take the views of the new culture internally. It's easier to just adapt and adopt that which surrounds you than it is to fight back against it, because that gets you into trouble. Often, over time, these people will start to hate their former culture because it now doesn't agree with their obviously superior and definitely true new culture, because that's what surrounds them on a daily basis. We see this very clearly today. For example, you get people who come from a very strongly Muslim culture, and then they go to another country where Islam, especially fundamentalist Islam, is hardly a thing, and they've got a really, really hard time fitting in. It was acceptable where they came from to go out and rape women who weren't covered up, so they go and do that, and they get in trouble, as they should according to the rules of the new culture, because this is really old culture versus new culture. Eventually, most adapt, and the ones that don't really pay the price, but it can take many years, and if you screw up your life in the meantime, bad stuff happens. This dude came from a strong Christian perspective, and he can't figure out why he sees things that way. These people are really clueless about how reality works, and I find that terribly sad.
Even many atheists want to affirm that there's some things that are right and wrong.
There's a difference, though. Yes, I am only speaking for myself, but I find this to be generally true. You can correct me in the comments if you think it's different. Atheists, and remember I'm generalizing here, but they will accept societal declarations of right and wrong. Murder is wrong from the perspective of the culture in which they live. If you go to a deserted island, murder is no longer wrong. I mean, you might carry that belief with you, but there's nobody there to enforce it, and there's nobody there to murder, so it doesn't really matter, does it? If there's nobody there but you couldn't murder anybody if you tried, because there's nobody else there to murder. Therefore, the idea that murder is wrong is entirely irrelevant. So when we say it, or when I say it, we're doing so subjectively. Morals are subjective. When you say it, I assume you're pretending it's objective, which it simply isn't. It's just an emotional reaction. You just want it to be true, but that doesn't mean anything. This is just your religious mind poison clogging up your brain, and it's not just religion that can do that. Basic enculturation can do it too. Lots of people believe that because it's in the law, therefore it's objectively wrong, because they've been told since childhood that it's wrong because it's wrong. Well, it's just got to be true because there it is. And those people are idiots. They really are. That is not how any of this works.
My moral experience tells me that there is a moral law, and a moral law would imply a moral lawgiver.
That's the lie that you've had your head filled with. If you've never been told that, if you've been raised non-religious, you wouldn't believe that. You might believe other things I really couldn't say, but you probably wouldn't believe that. However, you are just asserting that because this is how you were raised, that it must be automatically true, and therefore you just can't change your mind. And that's just ludicrous. You aren't concerned with reality. You don't understand what has been done to you. A lot of people don't, and even if it's explained to them, a lot of people will still refuse to acknowledge it because it's emotionally uncomfortable. You need to be able to set your emotions aside and deal with the demonstrable facts, and sadly, a lot of people can't. That's a you problem, not an us problem. You really need to grow up.
And so when an atheist wants to say that it's wrong, for example, for a Christian to impose his beliefs on atheists, well, he's making a moral judgment.
No, he's not. He's telling you to keep your stupid bullshit to yourself. There are things that we as humans, as societies, agree with fundamentally because they work within the societies that we live in. We agree that there's a speed limit. Just to keep this as generic as I can. We might not agree on what it should be, but once it's encoded into the law, once everybody's been following it for a long time, it is what it is, and the police can pull us over and give us a ticket for exceeding it. We will start to think this is the proper speed limit. There is no such thing in objective reality. By the very fact that we live within that society, we are held accountable to that law whether we like it or not. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. That's a problem for some people like the idiot sovereign citizens who say, well, if I don't consent to the law, then it doesn't affect me. Yeah, how's that working out for you? That is not how human societies actually work. Theists are trying to do the exact same thing, imposing their own made-up rules on others because it makes them happy to do so. In the past and in some places, they've been able to, and maybe in some places they still can. But in the Western world, in the modern Western world, that time is dead and gone. You people have already lost. Your religion is going the way of the dodo. Maybe it's time for you to grow up and deal with it.
Where does that moral judgment come from? I think we all know that if God does not exist, then there's no reason, there's no way that we can ground any sort of objective morality.
But there is no objective morality. The fact that you really want there to be doesn't mean that there is. This is something that a lot of people have a problem with, but that doesn't matter, does it? You live in the world that you actually live in, not the world that you desperately wish that you did. He is doing absolutely everything wrong that most apologists are doing as well. He assumes that everything he already believes is true, whether that's the case or not, because he's been indoctrinated into it, and he's not rational enough to take that giant step backwards and reevaluate his existing beliefs in the damning light of reality. I did that. I was there. I didn't want to stop being a Christian. But the second that I realized that Christianity wasn't demonstrably true, in fact it was anything but, I just couldn't do it. I was more attached to reality than I was to the religion. And people like this guy, they're not. They're just not. They just really want to believe, and it's sad to watch them flounder around and act like idiots because they can't come to grips with the world that they actually live in. They don't want to live there. They want to live in a fantasy land in their head because reality terrifies them. Well, guess what? It's not going to go away. Maybe they should figure that out. Maybe they should learn to adapt. This is where we're going to stop for the day, and this is going to go on for a couple of videos, so be ready for that. What do you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. I honestly don't get people like this. I know why they do what they do. I don't know how they can be this stupid as to want to do it, but I do understand why they're doing it. And I guess it takes all kinds, but I'm very happy that I am nothing at all like that. Not anymore. Once I got the religious mind poison flushed out of my system, I was so much happier and so much more rational. I have a much better life now than I ever did when I was religious. And they could do it too, but they don't want to. How pathetic is that? The religious love to proclaim, "I've destroyed atheism," when they've done absolutely nothing at all of the sort. The only thing they've ever destroyed is their own credibility, and we're going to do some more of that today. Granted, these people don't really care because they're not in this for the truth, but for their own personal childish comfort, and we're going to see some more of that too. I really wish these people could surprise us once in a while. Don't hold your breath on that. We return to Stephen Hackett once again for his asserted Atheism Destroyed video, where he does absolutely nothing but make himself look silly. You can't destroy anything by just saying, "But I don't like it." He's making a fool of himself, but that's not exactly a surprise, is it? You'd have to actually understand atheism first, and clearly he doesn't have a clue. So let's get back to it and see if he can do any better this time. I wouldn't be holding my breath, because my magic 8-ball doesn't think he will.
There's nothing really right or really wrong. What the Nazis did, for example, in Nazi Germany, that was just matter in motion.
Technically, yes, but humans can make subjective moral decisions on what they will deem as acceptable and what they will reject. That's what happened with the Nazis. One side won the war and held the other side legally accountable for their actions. Was some of that revenge? Maybe. Certainly there were groups pushing for harsher penalties because they had a vested interest in seeking revenge. Not that there's really anything wrong with that. Honestly, a lot of people try to be really high-minded about justice, and it doesn't really mean anything at all. It's just the majority coming up with rules and holding everyone, hopefully, accountable. And no, it doesn't always work out that way, does it? Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who just don't understand the process. They are looking for something that just isn't there. And that pretty much describes religion, doesn't it? People wanting stuff that doesn't actually exist.
They were just doing what they do. They were just complex arrangements of atoms doing things to other complex arrangement of atoms. On an atheistic worldview, it's hard to see how what the Nazis did was really wrong.
Right and wrong are entirely subjective. It was wrong because the people who won the war and had the power and the will to hold the Nazis accountable, they did so. And I know this makes a lot of people uneasy, but that's what's actually going on. When the Catholics were murdering heretics in the Middle Ages, it was the same thing going on. Just stapling "God said so" onto it doesn't make it any more or less moral. It's just humans doing what humans do. The same is true when the Incans or Aztecs were ripping people's hearts out of their chests. That was the moral system that they believed was true. They honestly thought that it would help the people. And in fact, and I've said this before, but the prisoners who were going to be sacrificed, they lined up willingly because they thought that their sacrifice would help their own people. This is why people need to get a grip on reality instead of just run around with their own personal emotional goalposts. What you really want to be true doesn't mean anything. Only what is actually true does.
Furthermore, it seemed obvious to me that the age-old question, why is there something, rather than nothing, is better answered on theism and Christianity than it would be on atheism.
Because you're really an idiot. I have come to the conclusion that anyone who says that, they can't be anything else. It's a nonsensical proposition that only the religious say, because it's all just projection. They're the ones that believe that something came from nothing, not us. They're the ones with the magical God thing that zippity-doo-dot everything out of its own asshole. That is not a rational perspective, and it certainly isn't one that atheism or science pushes. In fact, it does exactly the opposite. There isn't nothing. There's never been nothing. Nothing can't even exist so far as we can tell. Anyone who says that something came from nothing is a complete moron. Anybody who says that that group over there says this, They're being disingenuous. They're lying to you because they're assholes. It's why this guy is such an idiot, because he came from a religious background and he's apparently unable to get that indoctrination out of his head long enough to even understand the conversation intelligently. And that's not remotely a surprise, is it?
Now, there's nothing particularly special about these atoms that surround us. They seem to be contingent things. They seem to be things that may or may not have existed.
So what? The religious say this as if it's some important revelation, but it's not. It is what it is. Stuff exists, and it's not important. Now, yes, he's trying to get to his God is non-contingent claim, but we'll set that aside until he does it because it doesn't get him anywhere either. The religious, in general, really want to think that everything around them is special, and it just isn't. They're not special either. They are desperately looking for significance, and it just doesn't exist. This, again, is because they can only see things from their particular religious perspective that they've had forced into their heads since they were small and even dumber. They've had their rational faculties damaged by the religious mind poison, and they can't see reality as it actually is anymore. Maybe they never could, I don't know. It's all of that religious baggage that makes them look so dumb, because that's exactly what their faith has made them. Dumb. Sad, isn't it?
But as Christians, we believe that something has always existed. If something hadn't always existed, then there wouldn't be anything now.
And this is where I want to point out the stupidity of from a Christian perspective, or however they put it, because you hear that all the time. I don't care about your perspective. I care about the actual truth. I care about what's really going on in the real world and the evidence that can be presented to demonstrate that it's actually so. Because they are starting off with the foregone conclusion that God done it, because that's what they really want to believe. But that doesn't make it true. Then, with no evidence at all in support, they simply demand that they're right because they really want to be, and everybody else is wrong because they don't like what other people say. They don't like what reality says. They just really want to believe. And how dumb is that?
Right? If something didn't always exist, then there wouldn't be anything for us to observe now. But there is something.
That's making a whole lot of assumptions that you have absolutely no business making. But it's always been this way because I have an emotional attachment to how things are today. Again, this is them starting off with the beliefs that they really, really like, but can't prove are true, and insisting they just have to be right because, of course, fifis. But when we point out just how irrational that is, they just shrug and keep on believing. The fact is, we have no idea what reality was like before Planck time. Not a clue in the world. In fact, at the moment anyway, we can't know. What these idiots are doing is claiming to know the unknowable because it strokes their immature egos. That's all that's going on here. They just like the idea. But liking the idea doesn't mean anything, does it? Not to anyone with a brain.
And it seems to us that it makes more sense that thing, whatever it was that has always existed, has to be something that's not contingent, not something that can just exist or not exist. It makes more sense to us to think that that would be somehow a necessary being.
Nobody cares what makes sense to you. This is something they need to get through their heads. This is why the whole, but it seems to me, common sense bullshit is so stupid. This is exactly where the entire religious side goes wrong. They are after faith in fifis, not demonstrable facts. We just really like the idea. So what? Nobody cares. And you notice that he's desperately trying to get to his imaginary friend, right? Even if there was a non-contingent cause, which no one has established since we can't even show that contingency is a thing before Planck time, but now it's a being. In a second, it's going to be his God. Why? Because he wants it to be, of course. This is the stupidity of the religious. Nobody cares what you want. What you want doesn't matter. We live in a world that is what it is. It works how it works. You are irrelevant. Your feelings don't matter. Yet they can't deal with that, can they? They have to get their ego stroked, and the only way they can do that is by embracing the mind poison that they've had shoved into their heads from a young age, before they had the ability to know any better, because it makes them happy. So what? Stop making ridiculous fools of yourselves. Deal with the actual reality. You are not helping your case any. Not that most of these people care.
A supreme being.
See? What'd I tell you? It's just a hop, skip, and a jump to things that make him happy, right? Because that's what he's actually after. Emotional comfort. It's why all of this religiously loaded language is just dumb. The second that they start talking about their perspective or their worldview, the moment they bring up their opinions or it just seems to me, I just laugh in their faces. They've earned nothing else. This is how immature children operate. If there's something that you don't understand, be honest and say, I don't know. Don't just make up a bunch of random bullshit because it makes you feel good. That's idiotic. And you people really need to stop being idiots.
So it seemed to me that Christianity and theism made better sense of the idea that there's something rather than nothing.
And there he goes again. It seems to me. So what? Has he said anything else in this video so far? I don't think so. This is all just, I'm trying desperately to get to something that floats my boat, and I've been primed to accept a particular religious view, so it's just gotta be true. I don't know why he thinks that's going to impress anyone. Remember, he's the one claiming that atheism has been, destroyed. And all he can do is say, but I really want it to be true. You are not getting anywhere remotely close, pal. You're just making a complete fool of yourself. Knock it off.
I was struck by something else. How is it that on an atheistic worldview we can even have rational thought?
There is no atheist worldview. Atheism is the answer to one and only one question and absolutely nothing else. In fact, I had a discussion in the comments of a video recently where someone, I think they said they were an atheist, but I'm not positive, but they were insisting that everyone had a worldview because it's how they viewed the world. But that's not how that works. So let's go back to the definition of the word, which is a particular philosophy of life or conception of the world. But that doesn't apply to me at all. I have no philosophy of reality. I have no conception of the world. I only have the world as I observe it, and I accept it as what it seems to be. That's it. No worldview involved. I'm not applying anything beyond there it is. I am strictly following the evidence where it leads and applying nothing else beyond the assumption that we all have to make that there is a world there to begin with and that we have any access to it whatsoever. That's all, and everybody does it. I'm not going into all that stuff again, problem of hard solipsism and all that. So now I think he asked a question or made a statement or something, and I honestly don't remember what it is, so let's get back to the video and see what he has to say.
I mean, if, for example, you can explain the position of, let's say, the planet Saturn by just doing the right calculations, the planet Saturn's just obeying natural laws.
Yup. And our calculations are based on our observations, which have been borne out repeatedly. The math works because we invented the math to correspond to the reality that we actually see. Saturn is where we say it is because we have repeatedly confirmed that's how it works. The universe isn't following the natural laws so much as we made up the natural laws so that we could understand the consistency of the universe in a way that makes sense to us. We keep refining the laws that we created as we learn more about how things actually work. The laws are not prescriptive, they're descriptive. We see it, we make up laws to describe it, that's how it goes. There isn't some book of natural laws out there that nature has to follow or it goes to jail. That's stupid, but it's really shocking how little these people understand about, well, anything, isn't it?
But it would seem like the atoms in my brain would also just be obeying natural laws. So if we had a supercomputer and could map out, the position of every atom, it seems plausible to me on an atheistic worldview or a naturalistic worldview, we could plot out what a person would be thinking 5 minutes from now.
And some people actually believe that. Personally, I think it's bullshit. I think the hard determinist view is absurd. Maybe if it was actually possible to have that understanding and that precision, maybe, but we don't, and there's no reason to think that we ever will, so what difference does it make? That assumes that we even understand the universe all that well as it is, which we really don't. So, hard determinism, hard pass. Come back when you can actually defend your views with evidence, when you can show me that you can do what you say you can do. And I'm not going to be expecting a whole lot because it's never going to happen.
And if that's the case, then their thinking is really just a product of atoms fizzing around, moving around in their brain. It's not really rational. It's just doing its thing. It's doing what the brain does in this environment at this temperature.
Yep, welcome to reality. But you have to remember that rationality, that's just something else that we came up with, just like everything else. I just roll my eyes at people who think that all of this stuff has to be something magical. It's not. We look at the world around us and we come up with conclusions that match our observations so that it all makes sense to us. That's science. When those observations predict future events consistently, we figure it's right. If we find exceptions, we alter our views until we find things that work consistently again, and then we figure that's right, at least for now. Science isn't perfect, nothing is. It works well enough in the moment, but it's not eternal. Neither is philosophy, neither is psychology, neither is medicine. Nothing is ever eternal. Welcome to the real world. This is something that a lot of people, religious and non-religious people alike, they have a real problem dealing with it. Everything is just atoms doing what they do. Our brains granted us consciousness. We're now trying to deal with things as best as we can. Nobody really cares if you like it. Learn to deal.
It's not really being rational any more than Saturn's being rational when it moves around in its rotation.
But Saturn doesn't have a choice, does it? We apparently do. Now, I don't want to get into the whole free will thing or anything, because it's really off topic, but from everything we can tell, we have the ability to make choices, and we do so. That makes us different on some level than a planet like Saturn, which has no choice whatsoever. It's just physics doing what physics does. But this again is a theist looking to be special when they're really not. I want to feel like I'm important. Well, you're really not, are you? Not in the grand scheme of things anyhow. You're just a smart animal with an ego, nothing more. Let's be realistic about this.
So it seemed to me that rationality, and really for that matter even intentionality, that the idea that I could have an aboutness, that I could be intentional about trying to do things. It's just atoms moving around in my brain. And an atheist like Alex Rosenberg, for example, he explains this from an atheistic perspective. It's an illusion. It's really just an illusion.
No, he explains it from his own perspective. He doesn't speak for all atheists. Nobody does. There is no atheist position. There are only individual atheists, and the only thing that we all agree on is that we don't believe in any gods. I really wish these people could figure that out. There is no atheist worldview. It simply doesn't exist. There are individual atheists and their own views, nothing more. When you talk to an atheist, you're not talking to all of atheism, you're talking to one guy or gal or whatever. One individual with their own thoughts. It really shouldn't be that hard to figure out.
If I were to embrace an atheistic worldview, I had to believe the rather absurd claim that my rationality and my intentionality were illusions.
I don't think they are. I just don't think that they are what you wish they were. That's the thing. It all comes down to expectations, and I think the expectations of most theists, at least the ones that I've talked to, are simply unreasonable. They don't want to live in the world that they actually live in. Too bad. They want to live in a magical happy land in their heads where they're all special and there's a magical man in the sky watching over everyone, and he's going to whisk us all away to a paradise in the clouds if we just follow his rules and kiss his ass. And that's just stupid. That is not the world that you actually live in. Maybe you need to grow up and learn to deal. Try.
But then if my rationality were an illusion, then my belief that atheism was true would also be part of that illusion.
And that right there just proves that you have no clue what the hell you're talking about. There is no belief atheism is true, because atheism makes no claims. There is no truth to believe in. We are making no truth claims whatsoever that must be believed. We just reject the bullshit claims that you're spouting because you have no way to back any of it up. It's no wonder these people make these ridiculous videos, because they've got no clue what the hell they're talking about, and they don't care. This whole "I've disproven atheism" crap is laughable. You don't even know what atheism is. You don't know what the real world is like. You're just delusional. You are looking only for personal emotional comfort, and you don't care what's actually true. What the hell is wrong with you? Please, someone, let me know down in the comments if you think you understand, because I just don't get it.
And so it seemed like to me that there was some sort of vicious circularity here. The other thing is, when I look around me, there seems to be so much order, so much design.
Well, before you get into that, we're going to stop for the day, because that's another huge topic that I don't want to get into this late in the game. We'll pick him up right there next week. Honestly, though, the more that I look at these people, the dumber they look. Every single one of them, they try to argue against atheism without having the slightest clue what the hell atheism actually is, what atheists say, or pretty much anything else. Why? Because they are deluded into thinking that everyone is just like they are. They don't actually care about anything else. They are seeking comfort, and when actual reality isn't comforting, they make a face and look elsewhere because they aren't after real understanding. They just want endless happiness. And that's just stupid, and that's why his entire "it seems to me" bullshit is utterly meaningless. Nobody cares how things seem to you. We care how things actually are. He's just dismissing reality because it doesn't conform to his own ridiculous fantasy. How stupid is that? Anyway, what do you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. I've been toying with a little more longer form content of late. Mostly I will try to do the content that's maybe 6 minutes or so, just to keep my responses reasonable, because more than that, and I've seen the religious start to ramble, and I don't think that's all that entertaining. This video is almost 12 minutes long though, which means I'm breaking it up into 3 parts. So let me know if you like doing longer things, because I've got plenty on my list in that range, some even longer that I could do. I know that's going to make the SUPERCUT fans happy, but I'm just trying to make sure I entertain everybody. I just don't want to get to the point where they're just repeating themselves over and over and over and restating all the stuff they've already said in different ways just to fill time. And I've seen a little bit of that here, but not a lot so far, so let me know what you think. So, until next time, try to make reasonable and rational decisions that don't rely on your feelings, because your feelings don't matter. Only reality does. And it's really too bad that the religious will never be able to figure that out, isn't it? This is kind of a sad case because this guy is just painfully dumb. Not as bad as some that we've looked at, certainly, who I think have something messed up in the wiring upstairs, but he's done it all to himself and he doesn't understand what he's doing wrong. He also seriously overestimates his own capabilities. We've seen that before. So here we go, one last time, into the insanity that is religion, at least from this guy's perspective. Enjoy! Welcome to the last part of Stephen Hackett's absurdly named Christianity is True. And he's done absolutely nothing to prove that anything he believes is actually true. It's just been, but I like it, over and over and over again. But that doesn't mean anything. He also seems to think that he somehow destroyed atheism when he's done absolutely nothing remotely of the sort. This guy seems painfully ignorant of pretty much everything. In fact, I'm starting to doubt that he can even dress himself on his own. And this is not at all uncommon, is it? So let's wrap this up as a prime example of what the religious mind poison actually does to people. Because this is nothing to be proud of. Let's get back to it and see what's what.
Whether I look at my own body, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a biologist, I'm not any of that, but...
And that's the problem. This stuff always comes down to, well, I'm ignorant, but it seems to me... I mean, seriously, talk to these people. It becomes apparent almost immediately how little they actually know about anything. It's like talking to creationists who know nothing except what it says on creationist websites. They take what they believe first, they just assume it has to be right because it would make them feel really bad if it wasn't. They do absolutely no independent research whatsoever. They just take the stuff that people on their site say and assume that it's just got to be right. Again, because they'd feel really bad if it wasn't. And then they think that they actually understand something. Except they don't. When I was looking at my faith, I didn't just read books by apologists. I went out to see if those apologists were right. I firmly believed then, as I do today, that the truth had nothing at all to fear from honest inquiry. I just found out that Christianity wasn't the truth. I then went on to find out that Islam wasn't the truth. Neither was Hinduism or any other religious belief that I have ever examined. They all fail for the exact same reason. They put their feelings first and actual facts not at all. The fastest way out of a fundamentalist belief in a religion is to get an advanced scientific degree, if you're actually doing it honestly. You get a few people who get degrees specifically so they can speak out against them, which strikes me as a complete waste of time. It doesn't make you look any better, and it only costs you a lot of money for nothing. Don't be stupid. Don't do that.
It seems exquisite what's been designed. You can look at the world that we live in.
Look at the trees! I mean, seriously, will the religious ever stop using that? It is not impressive. It just makes you look really stupid. They can't tell the difference between reality and their biased interpretation of reality. But it's simple to back them into a corner on this. How do you know it's designed? Where is your evidence for that? That I believe it. So what? The fact that you believe a thing doesn't make that thing true. Any more than the fact that most people used to believe the earth was flat doesn't mean that it was. Your beliefs are meaningless unless backed up with corroboratory evidence, and you've got none of that, do you? So stop making yourself look stupid. It's not a good look.
The parameters, the earth that we live on, the precise parameters, even down to the size of the moon that goes around our earth.
All of which proves that you are a moron. This is what happens when you just assume that what we see today was designed to be that way. That is untrue. Humanity is not the end goal of reality. We're just what happens when conditions are the way they are. And had they been different, then there never would have been a humanity at all. Something else would have popped up, and whatever that was, if anything had, it would have been something else, and they probably would be asking the same questions. Why is everything so perfectly set up for us? Because you're an idiot. Isn't it wonderful that we had 2 moons that made our life possible? No, you're a moron. He's starting with the faulty preconception up front that he was intended and is special. And he's wrong. And that's hardly a surprise, is it? This is why look at the trees makes them look so stupid. Being impressed by reality doesn't make it special or magical. It just makes you look like a ridiculous moron.
It just seems like there's an awful lot of design. And so you could explain that all by a million chance. Like there was a big bang on the atheist view, and just everything just scattered, and by a millionth of a chance this earth got right in this position, and by another millionth of a chance it collided with an asteroid. And there's so many chances.
There he goes again. He is assuming that this is how it was all supposed to be. For all we know, somewhere out there in the cosmos, there is an alien species looking up at the sky and saying the exact same thing. Isn't it wonderful how everything is perfectly designed just for us? No, not designed. You evolved that way just like we did. If Earth hadn't developed in a way that could give rise to life, then life wouldn't have evolved here. It might have evolved somewhere else. Hell, it might have evolved somewhere else. It might not have evolved at all. We don't know. Which means nobody would be here to talk about it. That's the reality of the situation. It doesn't matter if it makes you happy or not. It matters only if it's true. And by every shred of evidence that we have, that is exactly how this works. He keeps saying, it seems to me, and that means nothing. It means that he's an ignorant imbecile. If you can't come to grips with reality and instead expect that everything is just all about you and your feelings, you've got problems. And if you notice, the religious are usually like that, right? They can't get beyond their own fifis and faith. What a bunch of maroons.
So many improbable things that have led up to this moment that it makes you suspicious that more is going on than just matter and motion.
No, it makes it suspicious that you apparently don't have a clue. These things aren't improbable at all. You are just insisting that only one outcome is acceptable, and that's just stupid. The universe is what it is. It's never going to be anything else. That you are personally, emotionally attached to one specific outcome means absolutely nothing at all. It just means that you're a credulous dumbass. Knock it off. It just makes you look stupid.
Finally, if you've looked at Craig Keener's book, he has a book that's called Miracles. I think it's 2 volumes, filled and documented with cases of miracles.
Nope, not a one. Now, I guess it depends on how you're going to define the word miracle, but if we go with the dictionary definition, a miracle is a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Since you can't demonstrate that there are any divine agencies at all, that means absolutely nothing. You also can't demonstrate that it is supernatural, which is really what you're talking about, since there is no evidence that the supernatural exists. Hell, they can't even define what the supernatural means. It's just a word that they use to fill in their own ignorance. Just because we may not have a current natural explanation doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. We just don't know. There are all kinds of things in the past that were once considered supernatural that today we know are just perfectly natural things. You don't just get to appeal to God done it because you really like the idea. The only way to have a miracle in the religious sense is to be able to show that a real, demonstrable, verifiable God actually done it, and they're not even trying to do that. Assertion is not the same as demonstration, and demonstration is what it takes. So if you want to say it was an unusually fortuitous set of circumstances, okay, fine, go right ahead. That happens all the time. Things that are against the odds happen. Spontaneous remission of cancer isn't a miracle. It's something that happens in the natural world. It's not the norm, but it's entirely natural and we can study it. So let's stop playing make-believe and it seems to me, because that just makes you look ridiculous. I mean, you look bad enough as it is. Stop making it worse.
All around the world, there are citations of people having experienced miracles. I personally know people who have had miraculous things happen.
Nope, you don't. You might know people who have claimed miraculous things, but claims are not reality. Claims are just claims. This is where you get people making a complete fool of themselves. But I just know that God was responsible. No, you know nothing remotely of the sort. You believe it, you don't know it. Don't confuse the two. Knowledge requires some demonstrable basis in fact, and you don't have that. You just really wish it was true. It's an interpretation, not an established fact. This is where a lot of people go wrong. This is why it seems to me means absolutely nothing. Nobody cares how things seem to you, since the people who say this are dumbasses. It only matters how things actually are in the real world, and for some of it at least, we just don't know. Assigning an emotionally comforting, arbitrarily derived meaning to it, that doesn't make any of it true. And this is why all of this is so ludicrously absurd. I just know God did it means nothing. I had a near-death experience and Jesus spoke to me. That's meaningless. You had a broken brain and it hallucinated something, and you don't know how memory or brains actually work. What you arbitrarily attach to the experience doesn't make your explanation true. I'm not denying that you had an experience. I'm just saying I don't buy your explanation because you can't demonstrate that it actually happened that way. And that makes a lot of people mad. And those people need to grow the hell up.
Now, you don't have to believe every single miracle claim. But the reality is, if just one of those thousands of millions of miracle claims, just one of them are true, the atheistic worldview utterly collapses.
But you haven't proven that any of them are true. As we all know, if is not because. And we're right back to, it seems to me. Yeah, it seems to me that something has to be true. Really? Prove it. Because your say-so means absolutely nothing at all. Just because you really want it to be true, that doesn't mean that it is. Your assertions are entirely empty unless you can provide corroboratory evidence. So let's get to put up or shut up, and they can't do either one. This is just argumentation by bald-ass assertion because they really want it to be true. But that doesn't make it true. Stop making a complete fool of yourself. It's not a good look.
And that finally brings me to the most important miracle, and that is the resurrection of Christ.
You have no evidence for that whatsoever. Now, I am going to do a Am I a Mythicist video that explains a lot of this, but not all, granted. I'm not trying to do an exhaustive dismantling of the resurrection claims, because that's all they are. Claims. We have no evidence whatsoever that there ever was a demonstrable, verifiable Jesus. It's just a claim in a book of mythology written by anonymous non-eyewitnesses and things that people believe on faith, which I think we all know are unreliable at best. If that's the best you can do, and it is, then sorry, but I'm just not impressed. I'm just not. you are going to have to do far better than that. And as I keep saying, they're not even trying, are they? They're just making assertions and expecting everybody else to go along with it. But we're not. Why would we? Now, I'm willing to let him do his thing, but he's not going to do any better than anyone else because he can't. The evidence that would be required to support any of this simply doesn't exist. At least nobody's found it yet. But I believe it doesn't matter. But I believe that Elvis was taken away by aliens. Yeah, that means nothing either. Your beliefs mean nothing without the demonstrable evidence to back it up. You're just proving what a dumbass you are. And that's all this video has been. Almost 12 minutes of Stephen Hackett showing what a credulous idiot he is on the internet. And that's not something to be proud of. I would be ashamed if I was that dumb, and he really should be too. It's really a shame that he's not.
I think that there's good evidence to say that Jesus died and was buried, appeared to his disciples. There was an empty tomb. These things people have tried to explain these on a atheistic worldview, try to give natural explanations.
You don't have any evidence. You have a story in a book of mythology. That's it. You have nothing that independently corroborates any of it. Not one single aspect of the story can be shown to be true outside of my book says a thing. And I'm sorry if you think that's impressive, but it's not. It absolutely is not. For the sake of argument, will never be good enough. Now, I'm not saying it isn't possible that some real person or persons might have formed the basis for the story. Might, not did. I care about did, not might. We have no evidence to support it either way. I'm not saying there couldn't have been a failed apocalyptic preacher running around Palestine out of which came at least some of the myths. It could have happened, but could isn't did. We don't know anything, and saying that it happened is a complete waste of time until you have the evidence to support it. Remember, for the Trojan War, we didn't even accept that the war actually happened until it was independently corroborated with evidence. It was just a story in a book, and then we found actual evidence that it was real. And the same thing is true here. It is just a story in a book, and until we find actual evidence for Jesus, not the story in the book, not claims made by believers in the story in the book, but actual demonstrable evidence of a real Jesus that we can verify with something more than your say-so and fee-fees, it's going to remain a story in a book. Let's try for some consistency. That lots of people really like the idea doesn't mean anything. We need facts, and at least at the moment, there simply are none.
But they all tend to run into dead ends. So for those reasons, I think that Christianity makes sense of the world that's around me, the world of experience.
Because your epistemic standards are seriously shit. This is just, but I like it, so it's just gotta be true. I bet he isn't applying the same standards to anything else in his life, though, right? He doesn't believe that Muhammad split the moon in half, right? Why not? It says so in a book. He's not taking Hindu myth seriously, is he? This is just, but it makes me feel good. Like an idiot. This is why I can't take any of these people seriously. They are doing everything ass backwards. Instead of starting with the facts and coming to a conclusion based on the evidence that they actually have at hand, like a normal rational person would, they start with the conclusion derived entirely from their feelings, and then scrambling around, they're desperately looking for anything that they can interpret to support their wishful thinking because they just really want it to be true. But it appeals to me. So what? Having $1 trillion in my bank account appeals to me, but that doesn't mean it's there. It's why, almost without exception, the religious hardly ever read anything outside of their theological bubble. They are only looking for confirmation bias. Back when I was trying to establish the truth of my beliefs, I knew that that was an exercise in absurdity. I wanted to know what was really going on. I didn't want to know what they said was going on. I wanted to know the truth. And I was convinced that the truth would confirm my already existing beliefs. It just didn't, though. I at least had the guts to look, but people like this idiot, they can't do it at all. They don't want to know. They're terrified of the truth because they don't want the truth to set them free. And that's why they're so laughably dumb.
But if I became an atheist, I would have to believe that something comes from nothing.
Tell me you're a complete moron without telling me you're a complete moron. Nobody says that but the religious. This is a lie they've been telling for so long that they don't even recognize it as a lie anymore. Get out of your bubble and actually find out if what you believe is true. Because it's not. It's just not. By sitting there making these stupid claims, you're just embarrassing yourself. Knock it off.
I'd have to believe that morality is an illusion.
It's not an illusion, it's a human invention. He's just going, but I don't like it. Like that matters. I don't care what you like. Nobody cares about your comfort. Try reality for once. You don't have to like it, but it's real regardless. This is really, really sad.
I'd have to believe that rationality arises from non-rationality.
You don't understand what rationality is. Now, this is insanely common among the religious. All the stuff that we think we know, it's all based on observation and trial and error. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but too bad. He is looking for absolutes, and there aren't any, at least not in this sphere. He's just being intellectually lazy. He wants something that he can just embrace forever and ever and always, something that will never change, so he doesn't have to think about it ever again, because, thinking is hard and he's not that bright. And this is a problem for a lot of people, religious and non-religious alike. But it's still not something to be proud of.
I'd have to believe that order arises from disorder.
You'd have to understand what order is, and most people don't. What he's talking about here is his own personal interpretation of order, which is not order at all. These people will throw out the second law of thermodynamics and completely misunderstand what it means. The most perfectly ordered thermodynamic state that has ever existed is at the moment of the Big Bang. It's all been degrading since then. These people have no clue what the hell thermodynamics are, and that's why they don't really talk about it that way. They'll talk about the second law, forget the thermodynamics part, and then pretend like they've got a clue, which clearly they don't. They're just misusing the whole thing because it sounds good to them. This is why these people look so ludicrously dumb. Because they are.
And I'd have to believe that all of the miracle claims, including the resurrection of Christ, I'd have to believe that all of those, every single one of them without fail, aren't true.
Yes, you'd have to embrace reality. Too bad for you. All he's been doing this entire video is showing what a complete dumbass he is. He can't separate what makes him feel good, what he really wishes was true, from what is actually true. He doesn't care what is demonstrably true. When his faith and his fifis come into conflict with reality, he throws reality away because his emotional comfort means a whole lot more to him than the facts do. And this is true of pretty much all theists, but it's not just them. I had a conversation with a UFO nut not that long ago, and his reason for believing in aliens is because the idea was cool. He really likes the idea, so it just has to be true. All the lights in the sky, they just have to be aliens because the idea appeals to him on an emotional basis. He wants there to be mystery in the world. And that's something I hear all the time from, cryptid believers. They like the idea of unknown animals running around in the woods. Therefore, it's just got to be true. This is pure fantasy, not reality. And far too many people, they just can't get out of their own fantasy mindset. They just really want to believe. And it really is that dumb.
All those things do seem true to me.
And that's your problem. You don't care if they are actually true. You only care if they feel true. Feelings don't matter. It's why conversations with the religious go absolutely nowhere, because they can't get out of that mindset. It's not just the religious that do it, though. Seriously, have you tried to have a rational political discussion online lately? It's all, well, it seems to me, or I feel like this. I don't care. You don't just get to feel your way to reality. Reality is what it is. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It matters only what is actually true. Because whether you like it or not, reality matters. You don't. Grow up and deal with it.
And it does seem to me that we live in a miraculous world. It doesn't seem to me that something comes from nothing. It doesn't seem like morality is an illusion. It doesn't seem to me that rationality ought to arise from non-rationality. Rather, it seems to me that once I believe Christianity, all these other facets of my experience make sense.
No, you just threw away your rational mind and started believing nonsense because it's a whole lot easier than having to deal with the real world as it actually is. You don't care about reality. You care about comfort. You care about what I want to be happy. You are doing absolutely everything you can to get away from reality because you're terrified of reality. You are an immature little child hiding under the bed, telling yourself comforting stories to keep the monster in the closet at bay. That's how religion works, after all. It's all, but I don't want that to be true, and then just making something else up. And I'm sorry, but you are way too old to be doing that. You are way too old to have not come to grips with the real world. You are way too old to still be hiding under the bed. You have lost all credibility you might have ever had by acting like a complete dumbass. You have just revealed yourself to be an idiot. And that's not a good thing. It's just not.
More than that, I've come to know Jesus as my Savior.
No, you haven't. That's a story you've just made up in your head based on the lies of con men and shysters who are only after your money. You are a sucker, and for some reason you're proud of that fact. You can't understand what you're doing wrong because in your head you can't be wrong. That would just hurt your precious little fee-fees, so you just have to be right, so there. This is really dumb. This is really immature. This is not something that any ostensible adult ought to be proud of. But for some reason, tons of people out there are positively enthusiastic about being utter dipshits. What the hell is wrong with you all? I'd really like to know.
And he's proven himself to me time and time again.
I'd love to know how. Now, I know he can't provide any specific examples in this video. That's the only downside of doing things like this. But I have heard tons of theists making this claim, but it can never be sufficiently substantiated. They're too busy stamping Jesus on all their experiences without doing any of the hard work to show that Jesus was demonstrably involved. But I know it is. No, you don't. You believe it, but your beliefs are not a demonstrable part of reality until you have the evidence to back it up, and you're not even trying to do that. This is just confirmation bias, and that, again, is nothing to be proud of. It just makes you look like a fool. Knock it off. After that, he just gives his email account over and over again, which is silly, and I don't want to give anyone ammunition to spam him, so we're just going to skip over that. Don't go be an asshole to this guy, even though he might deserve it. Honestly, this was not at all impressive. In fact, this was a study on how not to be a rational person. This guy has problems, and I'm willing to bet that more theists are like him than are like me. He's afraid of reality. He wants nothing at all to do with reality. He just wants to be comforted and believe the stuff that he's had forced into his head and that sounds good to him because that seems to be all that he cares about. How stupid is that? I'd say this guy has problems, but They all do. They are all intellectually lazy, emotionally damaged, and rationally bankrupt. They couldn't care less what is actually true. They only want what feels good, and that is positively immature. You need to care about the world that you actually live in, not just make up comforting stories in your head that you really wish were true. At the end of the day, no matter what you believe, you are just wasting your time and likely causing damage to everyone around you because your beliefs inherently impact your actions. You are wasting time running around telling people about your imaginary friends. Grow the hell up, come to grips with the real world, and stop being a dipshit. It's really not that hard. Give it a shot.